Thanks for stopping by. Today I got several fluorescent lights in my tear apart. We're going to take a look at them all before I start tearing them apart. I got an older one in there from the late 1960s all the way up to 2000. We're going to take a look at the difference between the years and how much scrap value is in each one. Now you can see this one here that's next to the toolbox. This was in the late 60s, maybe early 70s. You could tell usually these were either in a trailer or else in the shop, or else it was above the kitchen sink. I would estimate that was the late 60s. Next two you see here, they kind of got a yellowish tint, so you know they've been around for a while. And when you pick them up, they're still kind of heavy. These two were made in the late 70s, mid 70s, late 70s. Possibly early 80s, but I doubt it because of the yellow tint. That usually takes a few years before the white turns like that. And this next one, I would say it's from the 80s. Started getting a little more plastic as the years progressed. And it's not quite as heavy. Move over to the next one. It doesn't have the middle piece, but it doesn't hardly weigh anything, and you can see for sure by the transformer that's in it that it was probably 1990s or early 2000s. This one was designed, I believe, before LED come out, where it looks like it might be about 8 or 10 years old at the most. Now, I've noticed with the electrical appliances, the newer they are, the less and less valuable metal they have in them. The older ones had a heck of a lot more copper and brass in them. My predictions in the next 10 or 15 years, electrical appliances will be useless to recycle and try to recover valuable metals from because there's less and less copper in them. Now I'm going to start tearing these apart. I'm going to start with the old one first, and we'll compare as we go through the amount of valuable metal in each one through the decades. Now you can tell right away it's older because it's got wing nuts holding this on. Less and less electrical items that they use wing nuts for. Like I said, I think this one's from the late 60s. It come out of a house that was built in the 60s. It's got a pretty good sized ballast in there for a small light. That's the first sign you can tell it's an older one, plus the size of these wires. It has the starters on it also. Them changed up a little bit as it gets newer. I'll bring you back in when I get it all cleaned up. Here's everything from the old shop light that I can recover valuable metals from. I wanted to bring you in on this to show you on these. You can tell it's older because if you look on the back, they got screws where wires go to. The modern stuff is soldered. You ain't going to see anything like this on the new stuff. Bring you back in after I see how much valuable metal we have cleaned up. Here's all the valuable metals out of the old 1960s fluorescent light. I got some copper, got quite a bit of brass. I'm surprised with all those ends. Got a little bit of insulated wire and a little bit of aluminum from the starters and the switch button. I'll reveal the total weight at the end of the video. Two I'm working on, I think these were made around in the 1970s, the 80s. Why I say that, you look on this one here, it's got a tag. I mean, we put price tags on stuff now, but it's got barcodes. Obviously, that's not a barcode, that's old school. The yellowing on them, especially this one, I feel this one's probably a little bit older, but I'm not 100% sure. I'll bring you back in when I get these tore apart and show you the valuable metals. So there's a considerable amount more brass on the older one. There is some brass on these. I believe the one on the right is a little bit older. But the yellow in color on this ballast, and because it's bigger, makes me believe that this is an older unit than the one on the left. The brass is a little more tarnished on the right side than it is the left. On the right is a little bit bigger on size than the one on the left. Makes me also believe that the one on the right is older. I'll come back in when I get these transformers tore apart and we can take a look at what's inside them. Now you can see clearly there's a big difference. This one has circuitry, which makes me believe that this was the 1980s. It really did. I mean, they had circuit boards in the 70s, but it was in its infancy. This definitely is pre-1980s for sure. I have aluminum windings, which also makes me believe that it's newer. The way they got the schematics on this ballast tells you for sure that it's older, in my opinion. This one has copper windings in it. Now, I think both these lights are from the 90s. Everything was really getting chintzier. You can tell on this one, this ballast is even getting smaller. And this one's even ridiculously smaller. I believe these two are from the 1990s. One of these might have been a little cheaper than the other, that's why it's different. But I don't think they're that recent, just going by what's on the inside of them. So let me get these tore apart. I'll bring it back in and show you the valuable metals. Now I had to bring it back in for a minute on this one on the right. The ballasts were in the ends. The ballast transformer was in the ends. It also has a little circuitry in it. So I was a little confused by what I was seeing in the middle when I took it apart the first time. But it does have ballast on the ends. Now that I'm looking at it, I believe this one on the right here was probably pre-1980s, maybe late 1970s. Just judging by what the circuit board looks like. It's probably unlikely in these capacitors. They don't put those kind in the newer stuff now. This definitely is 90s to 2000 for sure on this, just by judging the circuit board. The transformers are really shrunk down, so I could definitely attest that this is probably close to the year 2000, late 90s, 2000 on this light. This is the last light. In my opinion, this is the newest one, maybe 5, no more than 10 years old. I'm going to get this tore apart. We're going to take a look in here. There might be a transformer in here for the ballast. Maybe this is right before they switched to LED. They were really getting chintzy. So let me get this tore apart and I'll bring you back in if I find anything interesting. Definitely a newer one. It has circuit board in it. And I'm assuming this side has a circuitry board too. Let me finish tearing this apart and I'll bring you in on the valuable metals. Here's all I recovered from the fluorescent lights. Starting from the left here, this is the newest one, I would say within 5 to 10 years old. So that'd be like 2000s, 90s, 80s, 70s, and 60s. It looked like to me about the 1990s. It didn't have copper windings, so there's nothing on that one. But these two here, I'm guessing they were made about the same time, but one was a little better product, so that's why it had copper in it. At the time, there was a transition of using aluminum. This is what we got from the 1960s style fluorescent light, and it was one of the short ones. It wasn't the long ones. So there's quite a bit recovered for a small light. Them were only 2-footers, them weren't 4-footers. If we go to the next decade, see the copper is about the same, but the brass is less. And then we're 4-foot tubes. We go to the 80s, you can see it's getting less copper, finer hair, less copper, smaller wires. Then in the 90s, we got 2 of them there. One was aluminum and one wasn't. You can see a few transistors in there, so they didn't really have too much of the circuit board and them kind of lights back before the 70s. And we got the 2000 and up right here. There's hardly no copper at all left in it. Got a little bit of wire, a small amount of brass, and a teeny amount of copper. I didn't throw the cords in when I was weighing it up. It did seem fair. A couple of them didn't have cords on it, so we could get a fair value. There's not a lot of value in these type of lights anyway. Definitely the newer ones, it's getting less and less. The more recent ones had aluminum windings in them, so that's even worse yet. The most valuable thing on the whole thing is the plug-in. If it ain't a long plug-in, then it's hardly no value. But nevertheless, it tore it apart so we could all see the comparison from the 1960s up to date. We're losing value on our products. Sure, we'll buy them cheaper, but in another 10 or 20 years, there's going to be a lot more landfill if you can't recycle it. If it ain't worth nothing at the scrapper, what are people going to do? They're going to throw it in a landfill. They're not going to waste their time to bring one light up there when it's worth 10 cents. If you had fun on this adventure and this information has been helpful, we'll see you guys in the next video.